Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the virtual discussion about mindful snacking in practice. This is the second panel in a series hosted by Mondelez International on how the concept of mindfulness applies to eating and snacking. Our first panel in October 2014 focused on global snacking trends and explored how consumers can incorporate mindful snacking in their lifestyles. Today we'll be diving a little bit deeper into the conversation to understand more ways people can practice mindful eating, consumer preferences for mindful options, and how innovation and R&D are at work to offer people more mindful choices. The topic is especially compelling right now in light of recent research that reveals that fully 94% of Americans snack daily, and more than half of all American adults snack 2 or 3 times a day. That research also showed that 70% of respondents believed that anything can be considered a snack these days, and that people are increasingly replacing traditional meals with frequent snacking. My name is Jennifer LaRue Huguet, and I'm a former nutrition columnist at the Washington Post. I'm happy to return to this panel series as moderator to guide you through this virtual discussion. So if you're new to the Google Hangout platform, I hope you'll enjoy some of the great features it offers. Throughout today's discussion, we encourage you to submit questions through the Q&A function that's on the right of your screen. We'll make time to answer those questions toward the end of the hour. And if you experience any technical difficulties, please do let us know through this function, and a member of our team will reach out with support. You're also welcome to use the applause feature to let us know what you think of the conversation as it progresses. So, housekeeping aside, I'm panelists. Dr. Susan Albers is a New York Times best-selling author and a clinical psychologist at the Cleveland Clinic who specializes in mindfulness. She conducts mindful eating workshops across the country and is the author of 6 mindful eating books. Her work has been featured in a variety of outlets, and she's a contributor to the Huffington Post and Psychology Today. Today she'll walk us through the mind-body connection, that's mind-body connection, and share advice for mindful eating. Hank Cardello is a senior fellow at the Hudson Institute and a former food industry executive. He is an advocate for practical public policies on food and obesity issues and studies how business can profitably transition to better-for-you products. He is an accomplished author whose perspectives have been shared in many publications and is a regular contributor to The Atlantic and Forbes. Today he'll share some of his work and research on consumer preferences and trends within the food landscape as they relate to mindful eating. And finally, our third panelist, Todd Abraham, is Senior Vice President of Research and Nutrition at Mondelez International. Among other responsibilities, he works to apply innovative research, fundamental science, and consumer insights to R&D efforts. Todd will elaborate on product innovation and mindfulness for us today. So, without further ado, I'll kick the discussion off with Dr. Susan Albers. Hi, Susan.
Hi, how are you?
Great, how are you?
That's a pleasure
to see you this morning. So we'll jump right in. Can you tell us, when it comes to physical behaviors such as eating, there's often an emotional connection that plays a role in our thought and decision-making processes. Can you tell us a little bit more about that mind-body connection, please?
Sure. Each and every day, we make over 200 eating decisions. That's a lot of decisions in one day. And the majority of these decisions are not about our hunger. Instead, they're about emotions. We eat when we're bored, we eat when we're stressed, all different kinds of feelings, and that impacts the way that we eat. And this is very different than the typical physical hunger that we experience. Things like when your stomach is rumbling or you're feeling really low energy. That's how you know that you're physically hungry. And the connection between our emotions and eating is so complex. We're learning more about it each and every day. But the good news is that we can start to unravel that connection between our physical hunger and our emotional hunger. And that helps the way that we eat and we snack. And becoming more mindful, using mindfulness, and checking in with ourselves really regularly, we can begin to understand and unravel and understand that difference between emotional and physical hunger over time. It's not easy, but with practice, we can start to use those internal cues to know when we're hungry and when we're full and the difference between the two.
Ooh, And anybody can do this, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yes, it sounds difficult, but it's easier than people can imagine.
Well, give us some tools then, maybe. What are some of the ways we can check in with ourselves about our hunger, and tell us more about applying an understanding of that connection to actually eating more mindfully?
Well, mindful eating and snacking is really about taking a moment to pause and check in with your hunger. So you can ask yourself two questions. Number one, what am I feeling right now? Again, tuning into those emotions and asking yourself, am I feeling stressed? Am I feeling bored? What is it I'm feeling? And also asking yourself into question number two, on a scale from 1 to 10, how physically hungry am I? With 10 being very, very full, you can imagine, eating a holiday meal, that feeling that you get being really, really stuffed. And 1 being really hungry, being starving. And knowing where you fall on that scale can be really helpful, especially in determining what's going to satisfy you. Do you need a meal or a snack? So if you tune in and say to yourself, okay, right now I'm a 7, then maybe a snack is most appropriate. If you say to yourself, I'm a 2 or 3, it's time for a meal. For many of us, it's really easy to fall into what we call autopilot eating, and it's just that automatic eating that we're just not really thinking about it. And what mindfulness does, it helps you to shift out of that autopilot eating and respond instead of react to your hunger. And when you take a moment to acknowledge your hunger and respond to it with a decision. So many of us just eat because food is there. We see it and we respond automatically because it looks good. But mindfulness is really about making more of a decision about what it is that you want to eat and sticking with it, which can sometimes not be easy. But when you're mindful of your choices, what the good news is that you don't need to cut out specific food groups. And that's something that I really talk to with readers and my patients, is that we don't have to cut out food groups. Like if you love chocolate, if you love ice cream, but learning how to eat it in a more mindful way, which is great for the long run, because what we find is that when people cut out food groups, they want it even more. That's kind of human nature. And mindful eating, also the good news is that it can help you to recognize when you feel too full, and that helps you to make better choices over time.
Well, I love chocolate and ice cream, so I'm very glad to hear that. So can you talk a little bit more about, kind of more concrete ways, how do you balance this? How do you enjoy these foods and maintain a balanced diet at the same time? Are there boundaries, any kind?
Well, one of the common misperceptions that people have is that if you give yourself permission to eat the foods you love, so you say, okay, you can eat chocolate, that you're going to go overboard. And this is just simply not the case. And I really like to stress that and give that information to people, because mindful eating isn't just about eating whatever you want. It's about tuning in to what your body needs and what's going to make you feel satisfied. It's also about tuning into nutrition, what kind of foods make you energized and which ones make you feel depleted. And it really is also about enjoyment. I think it's so important to enjoy the foods that you eat, and particularly because when we enjoy food, that's when we eat less. It's when we get to the bottom of the bowl that we're eating something and we get to the bottom and we say, I didn't really enjoy it. That's when you go for more. So I particularly like the concept of savoring the first bite when you eat. And what research indicates is that first bite is actually the most flavorful. So if you can tune in to that very first bite and ask yourself, how does it taste? Do I like it? You are going to get much more pleasure out of what it is you're eating. So mindfulness, the good news is that it doesn't take a lot of effort. At first it takes some attention, but with practice it really becomes second nature. It's something that you can do no matter where you are. If you're out at a restaurant, if you're at home, if you're at the office, it's a tool that you can use anywhere, and particularly at restaurants and with our snack foods as well.
Well, that's great. I love that concept of savoring the first bite and getting so much more flavor out of it that way. That's new. So does this apply just to grown-ups, or can families adopt these mindful practices, and particularly kids?
That's another thing I love about mindfulness. It's great for everyone. Everyone can learn the skills of mindful eating, particularly because, as early on, we are taught at an early age that food is a reward and it's a comfort. You get a great great on your homework, and a parent says to you, okay, let's go out for ice cream. And the danger of this is that when we use food as reward, we can also use it as a punishment or deny ourselves certain foods. So what I encourage people to do is to really shift your mindset. Instead of thinking about food as comfort or reward, but thinking of it as a treat. And the good news with a treat is that you can schedule it in. It's something that you can look forward to, you can anticipate, and most importantly, you can also adjust how you eat throughout the day. So if you know a treat is coming up or a snack that you love, you can shift the rest of your day and be mindful of that. The concept can also really be passed down to kids and teens. What we know from research and just from human nature is that kids pick up, they absorb the habits that adults have, particularly the adults around them. So you can do a lot of good role modeling. It's really important to teach kids not just what to eat, teaching them how to choose those foods, but about how to eat. So, for example, and this is really hard, and anybody who's a parent knows that these things can be tough, is trying not to eat in the car. So if you're driving, not feeding the kids in the back seat as you're driving. Also sitting down at a table. Often we're walking around or snacking in lots of different places. Also turning off the TV while we eat, or phones. Often you see people texting and eating at the same times. Or turning off those distractions can be really helpful. These are some really small aspects of mindful eating, but what you notice is that it's changing behaviors and how you relate to food. It's not changing the foods, but changing how you relate to food. And you can teach these early in kids' lives, and you will notice that they last throughout their whole adulthood.
What a great gift to give to your kids, huh?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, you make a really good point then about how important it is to cut out these distractions and enjoy a meal sitting down. Do you have any other tips or tools to share with us for cultivating and maintaining mindful eating and snacking? I know that you do.
Yes, well, if you are somebody who wants to get started with mindful eating, one of my favorite tips to share is what I call the 5 S's of mindful eating. And this is something that I created, and people can learn about more on my website, eatingmindfully.com. They're simple, they're straightforward, they're easy tips that you can implement, and they can help all of us to eat more mindfully. So if you do these 5 things. So number 1 is to sit down first. And research shows that people who actually sit down at a kitchen table or a dining room table have a lower BMI. So it sounds like something easy to do, but I would challenge people to notice how often they are not sitting down while they're eating. Maybe they're in the lunchroom and snacking on things, or they're sitting at their desk. So number 1 is sit down. Number 2 is to slowly chew. And as I like to say, one of my mottos is, pace, don't race. Eat really, really quickly. One of the things that we can do is to try to put our fork down between each bite. That's something that's going to help you to naturally slow down. And then one of my very favorite tips, and it's very easy, is to try eating with your non-dominant hand. So I'm right-handed, putting my fork in my left hand, because that's going to help to naturally slow me down over time. It's like writing with your opposite hand. The third S is about savoring. As I mentioned before, that first bite is so important. As you take that first bite, noticing the aroma, how it tastes, the sound, and asking yourself, do you really like that particular bite? And if you shift into that mode of savoring, it's going to get you out of that autopilot eating. And the next S is about simplifying. Simplifying your snack choices. So putting foods and snacks in particular in convenient places, because we are really creatures of convenience. We like it when food is easy to grab and to reach. So if you put your snacks, or particularly your healthy snacks, or the ones that you find really satisfying, in a place where you can reach them and see them, this is going to help you to eat a lot more mindfully. And then finally, the final S is one that I like a lot, is about smiling. And smiling can be helpful because it creates that gap between each bite. So you are about to take that next bite, taking a smile, because it helps you to pause, take that pause moment and say, do I need another bite? Do I want another bite? Do I want to continue? And then you can go on. And also it's just kind of fun to smile as well. It's a nice way to end that bite.
Mm.
So the take-home message is that mindful eating is really about eating with intention, checking in with yourself when you eat and savoring each bite. Because I believe that eating should be really fun and that you should eat the foods that you love in a mindful way.
Wow, thank you so much. I can't wait to put those 5 S's into practice, especially the one about eating with my left hand. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to manage that, but I'll try.
It's a challenge at first, but easy to do.
Well, thank you so much, Susan. So let's kick it over to Hank. Hi, Hank.
Hi, good morning. How are you, Jennifer?
Well, thank you. How about you?
Oh, doing great. I'm smiling thinking about some chocolate right now.
We all are, Hank. We all are. So, through your work and research, you've learned a lot over the years about what people want and how food companies can meet those needs. Can you tell us about current consumer preferences within the food landscape, please?
Oh boy, there's a lot going on from a consumer perspective. I mean, overall, it's very clear that consumers now are actually figuring out the link between eating healthier, lower calorie food, better for you foods, and they're seeing the link between their diet and their health. So it's very clear that this is no longer a fad. It is legitimately a long-term trend. But what we are finding, interestingly, is, as many marketers know, not all consumers are created equal, and there's some very different perspectives out there. And we've broken it down into 3 types of consumers: those who are really seriously purists about the food. It's all or nothing. It's perfect or not. At the other end, we have our, if you would, the eat, drink, and be merry crowd, which speaks for themselves. And perhaps most interesting, both from a consumer and business standpoint, is this middling group, the ones who want their foods to be a little better for you. They don't necessarily want them all the way to bright, but they want, let's say, lower calorie, better for you versions of their most favorite foods. And I think that's the trend we see, and also perhaps the biggest business opportunity.
Excellent. Well, it sounds as though that group welcomes options and tools to eat well. Can you help us connect the dots, kind of making connection between tools like applying mindfulness to snacking and the better choice and portion control concepts?
Well, portion control, I think, is a big driver that we've seen in our research. For instance, we've seen a lot of the growth for packaged goods companies, including and also restaurants, supermarkets, etc., coming from these portion control kinds of packages, lower calorie versions. And I think this is where we have to pay attention, because going to Susan's comments about mindful eating, oftentimes we are not very mindful about our eating. So if we present consumers with choices that still give them the enjoyment, if you would, of their favorite foods, yet at the same time are not so calorically loaded, that's a big plus. And again, the consumers are telling us they're looking for these kind of versions of these kind of products. So I clearly see that this is the direction they're going into. The other thing we can't forget is there's this huge need for convenience. Oftentimes, there's discussion in some of the major news media that we should be preparing, Kale Plus and special meals and spend 2.5 hours every night getting ready for an Epicurean feast. However, most people have 20 minutes, and that's why, quite frankly, they'll end up going to the drive-in many times. We also see that kids are a big driver in the decision of families to eat lower calorie, better for you types of products, because they are concerned about the health of their kids and rising obesity rates. And again, these kind of products are the ones that really can help address those types of issues in a very seamless way.
Well, some of us, and this is something we addressed a little bit with Susan, but we'll kick it to you too. We've been taught, many of us, to think about food in terms of good foods and bad foods, and some foods being off limits. Is there a better way to approach our better choice eating?
Yeah, I have to agree with Susan's point. I don't buy into the good foods versus bad foods argument. Interestingly, the best. Okay, I
You're
guess someone disagreed with that point of view, but my, my point of view is very simple. We've looked at, interestingly, consumption patterns, and we've looked at indulgent foods, which would include cookies and candies, even sodas, etc., products like that. And what's interesting is that when we look at obesity rates and we look at exercise rates, and we look at the amount of products consumed, we do not see a correlation between consuming some of these more indulgent products and things like obesity rates. So when individual product categories are targeted as problematic, the evidence that we're unearthing right now does not support that. A classic example is those, for instance, who I mentioned earlier, who are interested in better for you types of foods, all right, compared to those who, let's say, don't believe in nutrition and they eat what they want and they have the highest obesity rates. What we're finding is they consume about the same amount of indulgent products, yet one group has a significantly higher obesity rate. And the reason is when we unearthed the data, we found that this group with the higher obesity rate only exercises a third of the time compared to the other groups. So again, we're finding a lot of these patterns right now where it's evident that I don't see the good versus bad as being directly related to the health problems we have. So I don't buy into that particular premise.
fair enough. Thank you. Are you seeing people being more savvy in any of these three groups, but particularly these better for you kind of oriented people about reading food labels and using those labels to help them guide their food choices? That's
Yeah,
something you're seeing?
definitely. There's an overall trend of people paying more attention to food labels, whether it's reading the ingredient lists on the back, or front of pack labeling. So overall, there is a trend, but again, there are huge gaps across these consumer segments. The ones who are, let's say, proposing a lot of these policies, definitely this is a group that's all over labeling. Over 80% of that group wants to see the ingredients. They want to know where they're sourced from. They want simpler labels. Transparency is important. Things like gluten-free, non-GMO, etc. They're all part of the package. But then you start seeing a sliding down of interest in labels. So again, this better for you group, yes, they do read labels, but not quite to the extent of the uber pure groups. So one of the things I personally believe that consumers should know what's inside their products. However, we have to be cautious about presuming that labeling alone will help us address healthier eating. I think it's good to give consumers information, but sometimes we're hearing back that they have information overload. In other words, give them calories and a couple of other items, but don't give them a laundry list of 21 individual ingredients or nutrients and expect them to either be looking for them or memorizing them. So I think that's the disconnect on the labeling.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I'm going to ask you, if you will, I'm very interested in this group of consumers that you've identified here, the ones who are looking for better for you options. Can you tell us a little bit more about them demographically, their ages and other aspects of them, so we have a better picture of who these people are?
Yeah, actually what's interesting is they don't necessarily segment on the traditional demographics, again, like income and education. The group that is demanding the most better for you options, if you would, are very diverse. So this is an attitudinal type segment where generally they do have kids in the household. Their income is literally all over the map. There are some very high income people in this group, but also a third of them are on the SNAP program or receive food stamps. So it's not limited by income. And what we see is this is a group that is very stressed out. Again, tying back to what Susan said earlier, there is a reason to pay attention not only to the physical need for hunger, but also the emotional needs. And these folks are both time stressed and literally stressed because, again, they have kids, many of them have 2 jobs, and they don't have enough time to eat correctly. So what we need to do is provide options that, again, they have a basis in what they're familiar with and the kinds of products they enjoy, but we just tweak them a little better for these consumers. So we make them invisibly lower calorie, or we inject some nutrients in them that help out from a health perspective. And those are the kind of things that can be done, and that's what they're looking for. They're not looking for a snack bar that contains tree bark. They don't want that. Taste is still very important to this group, but taste, convenient, kids, things like that are absolutely where it's going. And again, it's a business opportunity for the companies.
That's very fascinating. Thank you for filling us in on that, Hank. So we're going to ask you about what research is telling us about how companies who offer better-for-you choices see their bottom line affected. Is it good business for them to offer these choices?
That's a great question. Actually, we've conducted now 5 studies where we've looked at packaged goods companies primarily, but also restaurants and the supermarket sector. It's very clear that those companies that are being more aggressive about selling more lower calorie, better for you types of products are growing more, and we're seeing their overall growth is better. In an earlier study, we actually saw that companies that had a higher proportion of their sales coming from better for you products actually had higher rates of income growth and sales growth. So it's very clear there's a direct link between improving product portfolios and making more versions lower calorie and better for you items, because that is translating to growth. And if companies wish to grow, this is the way to do it. So again, it used to be considered if you offered better for you, healthier items, lower calorie, etc., that was the antithesis of what companies needed to do. But we're seeing these are now dovetailing so that it's actually in companies' best interest and the consumer's best interest. There's a win-win here. And actually, that's very pleasing to me because it tells us that we don't have to be adversaries here. There's actually a win-win for both.
Well, you stole my line. I was going to say it's a win-win situation. So, so talk to us a little bit about some trends. What do you see on the horizon coming, and any kind of ongoing trends that are likely to continue, or anything new emerging that you can share with us?
Well, I guess from a consumer segment, it's very clear that you asked earlier about demographics. It's clear that millennials are having an impact, and there's a lot more snacking coming out of this particular age group. In fact, I think meals are morphing into multiple snacks. So I see that trend. I also see that the definition of snacking seems to be broadening pretty substantially. If you look at the more traditional treats, which were maybe chocolate or fruit or nuts, now it's so wide. You have protein is in the mix now, so meat snacks, they're adding protein to yogurt. You're having cereal companies offering versions of their products as snacks. So I see a huge broadening of this definition of where we play as snacks, and the consumers are moving in that direction. I also see satiety as being an important need out there. By that I mean the need to be filled so that we don't overconsume, and I think products that can do that, I think will have a long life. I'd say finally an overarching trend, we used the word transparency before. That is for real. Consumers now more and more are asking for where their products are from, where they're sourced, what's in these products. They're looking for simpler ingredient lists. They're a little concerned about things that come across to them as, quote, chemistry sets. So I see a trend in that direction. So again, interesting changes. I think the companies that adapt to these changes more quickly will certainly benefit from that. but that's definitely, again, these are trends. They're not fads. And again, I think they're good business, but also the consumer really is changing right now.
That's a really good distinction between fads and trends. Thank you for that. Also sounds like a lot of good news for consumers who want to try to eat and snack more mindfully going on there. Thank you so much, Hank. That was really interesting.
All right, my
And
pleasure.
now we're going to move. Hi, Todd.
Good morning, Jennifer. How are you today?
How are you? I'm excellent. How about you?
Doing really well, thanks.
Good. So, your first question, can you just tell us about mindfulness within the broader food landscape? And what does mindfulness and mindful snacking mean to you and to your colleagues at Mondelez?
Well, I think you'll hear a similar message from us, too, because we're also listening to the consumer and to the consumer messages. And what it means to us is that people are just being a bit more aware of what they're eating. So building on what Susan and Hank both said, mindfulness is not about defining snacks and foods as good or bad, but it's really about thinking about snacking in the context of the daily diet and thinking about how you can fit these snacking occasions into the overall diet that someone consumes during the day and maintaining a good balance, a balance of nutrients and a balance of calories. So the notion of good foods and bad foods really doesn't fit into what we think. It's really about having good and bad diets, and a good diet is one that has the appropriate calorie level for the activities and exercise that someone does and has a good blend of different nutrients and components in their daily diet.
Well, that's a really good distinction, too, between good foods, bad foods, good diet as an overall phenomenon. Thank you. So we heard a lot from Hank about how preferences and how people make them more mindful in their approach to eating. Are you seeing this going on and from where you sit?
Most definitely. We see with our consumer research that consumers are looking for clear labeling, things that they can, again, understand. As Hank said, they're not looking for a chemistry set on the back of the product label, so they want a clear label that reflects what's in the product. They want to make sure that we can give them portion-controlled options to help them snack more mindfully, and to make sure that those satisfying snacks that we provide for them do indeed satisfy them for the occasion in which they're snacking. So we provide snacks that are 200 calories or less, but we want to make sure that they're satisfying so that they don't feel like they have to go back for another portion. So the notion of satiety or satisfying is important to us as we think about how to develop these snacks that meet the consumer's needs.
And just to be clear, we're not just talking about weight control here. We're talking about a general overall healthful diet and trying to seek that rather than just focusing on managing your weight, right?
Right. So we are looking at how do we include more whole grain and fiber in our products, and how do we decrease the level of sodium and saturated fat in our products. And we've made public commitments to that effect to make sure that we can reduce the sodium in our entire portfolio as well as saturated fat, that we can increase the number of products and the amount of products that have whole grain and fiber in them. It will continue to provide consumers with better choices and options that are at the calorie levels they're looking for, snacks that are 200 calories or less and are satisfying. And we measure these things continuously to make sure that we are better meeting those overall and overarching consumer trends and needs.
So let's talk a little bit more specifically about exactly what Mondelez is doing, taking a lead role in developing these products that meet this demand we've been talking about. It talks about specific products perhaps and how packaging and naming these products comes into play, please.
Sure. So there are a number of examples here that we've done to try to help people eat more thoughtfully. One is, as you said, creating mindful portions where people can get the right calorie-controlled package to make sure that not only do they know the calorie level on these packages, just a bit of an aside, we've also committed to making sure that we do put calorie labeling on the front of all of our packages so the consumers know right away how many calories they're consuming with the packages that they are choosing. So to really help them understand the calorie levels in these products, and then to try to help these lower calorie products be more satisfying for them when they're eating them. So we do have some examples. One is a product, Bubbly, is a chocolate product that we make where the product is lighter in texture and a little bit more foamy, if you like, so that people feel satisfied eating fewer calories of that chocolate product. We've looked at increasing the whole grain in product and the fiber in product through our Belvita line, where we provide consumers with 4 hours of energy in the morning. so that they can snack between breakfast and lunch and feel like they can stay satisfied between those two different meal occasions. So we look at opportunities like that to provide consumers many, many different choices.
Great, thank you. Talk to me a little bit about, you mentioned before this notion of having a product name that's aligned with its attributes. Can you tell us a little bit about how that plays out and how Mondelez, you and your colleagues handle that?
Sure. Well, one is Belvita, again. Belvita is a brand that it's really based on and defined around being a better choice for consumers, and the name itself, Vita, like vitality, helps connote to people that it's a more vital product, if you like, for people, that it really is a good product that people can consume for this occasion in the morning when people are looking for something to tide them over until lunch. Bubbly is another great example. We have bubbles in the product, if you like, which really helps consumers understand that it's an airier, lighter product for them to satisfy that treat occasion that they're looking for, where they want a smaller treat that they can have between maybe lunch and dinner, something that they can have in the afternoon when they're looking for that special occasion. And it really gets back to one of the things that Susie said early in the conversation, because we want people to love the foods they're eating, but we also want them to eat what they love. And being able to have them eat what they love and love what they eat is really important to us.
That's lovely. That's nice. I want to have some of that Cadbury bubbly chocolate. Sounds so delicious. So let's look ahead to the future a little bit and forward-thinking note. What do you see rising on the product innovation horizon when it comes to mindful snacking in particular? What's going to be the next big thing?
Well, we're always looking at the next set of snacking trends out there, and obviously we're working on things in the future that I can't talk about. They're a bit secret. Ingredient lists that are things that people can find. Make sure these ingredients are simple ingredients. Are able to. We also know that consumers products. We have a wheat thin pop product out today, which is a much lighter and airier product than the basic wheat thin, which satisfies a different need than when people are looking to put a topping on a cracker. So if people want to top a cracker, we have a standard wheat thin, but if people are looking for a lighter, airier snack that's baked and not fried, people can look at a wheat thin pop product and use that. So the consumer preferences and trends continue to evolve, and what we're trying to do is to understand what those trends and preferences are and best meet those attributes in a way that allows them to snack mindfully. I think we've lost Jennifer, our moderator here, so I'll just talk a bit more about some of our mindful snacking options. So as we continue to think about these different mindful snacking products, we have things like Triscuit and Oreo and Barney that really allow people to have portion-controlled varieties of products that either can be very, very high in fiber or whole grain, or can that be an all-natural, wholesome product like Barney is for kids that like those kinds of softer snacks. Oreo, an all-family treat that people can have and enjoy as part, again, of a mindful snacking part of their diet. And again, I think Oreo is a great example of how people can fit a snack like Oreo into a mindful diet. People often eat an Oreo with a fat-free glass of milk. So consumers can balance the notion for the treat that they have with a perspective on their total diet. They don't feel like they have to indulge in all parts of their snacking occasion, but can indulge in the parts that make sense, while they're a bit more mindful, if you like, about the parts where they can control things like fat levels. I don't know, Susan or Hank, do you have any other perspective on that?
Well, I think what we're seeing is that, again, the snacking arena clearly is one that is no longer a simple definition, very parallel to the way the soft drink industry has evolved. When you look back into the 1980s, basically the soda companies were simply soda companies. All right, they were simply in the case of Coke, it was Coke, Sprite, and Tab. All right, and now you look at those companies, and they're no longer a soda company. They are much more broadly offering beverages. So you have bottled water, which I couldn't imagine even introducing a bottled water when I worked in that industry, and vitamin waters and Sobe Lights and sports drinks. And I think what one of the observations is that the industry is now evolving where you have multiple categories now morphing into this snack category. So it's no longer the old standbys, the cookies and donuts and chocolate bars. Again, as I mentioned earlier, you have cereal companies in there. You have now popcorn is growing double digits, and guess what? That's affecting consumption of other bar products. So I think that's a very important trend, not only for industry, but also for consumer, that this whole snacking arena is growing faster, certainly than the rest of the center of the store. So that's the trends we see.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think an example for us is the move toward whole grain. We've increased the whole grain consumption coming out of our product portfolio by over 20% over just the past 3 years. And we continue to drive that because we see consumers are looking for products with more whole grain. We also have expanded our portfolio to include products that reduce some of the things that people are looking to avoid, like gluten-free or allergen-free, and we've just purchased a brand called Enjoy Life, which is a free-from brand that's free from these main allergens. It's gluten-free and allergen-free because we see that as a consumer trend in the future as well. And providing those alternatives, whether it's more whole grain and fiber or products that are allergen-free or gluten-free, we agree with you. We really do see the consumers moving toward those different snacking opportunities.
Well, thank you so much to our intrepid panelists for keeping the conversation going while the moderator dropped out of sight for a few minutes there. You did a great job. And thank you to all three of you, Susan, Hank, and Todd, for sharing all those insights and giving us so much information about all this mindfulness and mindful snacking and research and development. It's a lot to absorb in one session. I'm looking forward to thinking about it more later in the day. We've got some questions, I think, that have come in over the course of today's discussion, and we'd like to take some time to address those now. So just to remind people that if you want to use the Q&A function, click the third icon at the top that looks like 6 squares. Click that and select Q&A. Now that seems pretty simple, huh? You can also submit questions to the email you RSVP'd to. So that would be mindfulsnackingpanel@inventivehealth.com, and that inventive does not have an E between the V and the H, so it's Inventive Health with no E there. So mindfulsnackingpanel@inventivehealth.com. So, all right, here's our first question that was emailed in by Jesus from Miami, Florida. This one is for you, Susan. Jesus wants to know, how can I encourage my children to join me at the table and eat more slowly? That's a very good question. Good luck, Susan.
It is a good question, boy, and it is a tough one for parents to get their kids to eat more mindfully. Anybody who has little kids know that they're running around and it is hard to get them to the table. One of the things that I mentioned before that I just think is so crucial is just making it an unofficial rule in the house that the TV goes off whenever you are going to have a mealtime, and all of those distractions going off. And I think that's one way that you can encourage kids to get to the table is turning off all of those distractions if there's nothing else that is happening. What research indicates, though, that if you can get your kids to the table, it is so essential. It fosters communication. They will also observe the way that you're eating. So just being a great mindful eating role model as a parent can go a long way, I find, with kids. They do what you do. So if you're sitting down at the table and you're modeling that mindful eating behavior, it's going to be very helpful.
Excellent. That's helpful. Thank you. Oh, another question. Oh, this one's for Todd. Do you find that mindful eating or snacking is received differently in various markets or regions? Are some of these markets or regions more receptive to the concept than others? That's a good question.
It's a great question. I do see differences region to region, and I think those differences reflect the different diets that people have around those regions. Because again, in the notion that snacks are part of a healthy diet, different cultures and different regions have different dietary preferences and different dietary cultures. So there's some markets where people tend to eat dinner very late, and then you don't see very much evening snacking. And there are other cultures where people eat an earlier dinner, and then people are looking for a dinner, for a snack after dinner in the evening, sometime between dinner and before they go to bed. So we do see that difference, and we see differences then in the types of products that we try to provide for people to meet those different snacking needs. And again, to make sure that people are thinking mindfully about what they're eating when and how that fits into the diet. So the notion of just having an evening snack because you always have one, as opposed to having an evening snack because you're really hungry and you maybe had an earlier dinner that evening, is the notion we're trying to see. So we do want people to think differently about this as we look from culture to culture, and we provide those different options.
Excellent. Thank you. This is a very good question for Susan again. So going back to your 5 S's, which we found so helpful, can you talk about how specifically to apply those to snacking? We kind of talked in terms of meals a little bit more, but can you bring it back to snacking for us?
Right, absolutely, because that is, as we've been mentioning today, that is such a part of our lives, is snacking. And I think it's very appropriate to snacking using those 5 S's. Think about the last time that you were getting a snack. Maybe you were standing, this is what often happens, and my clients often describe to me, they're standing in front of the refrigerator or they're standing in front of the cupboard, and they find themselves taking a little taste of this or a little taste of that. And what I encourage people to do is take that snack, go sit down at the kitchen table, and when snacking has all of our attention and we're not multitasking or doing other things, that's when we really enjoy it. And our bodies perceive it in a different way. When we are really focused on what it is that we're eating, we enjoy it more, we slow down, the experience is different. And research really backs this up, that eating our full attention really matters. So also the slowly chewing. Again, if we're going to have a snack, whatever it may be, maybe it's that bubbly chocolate we were talking about. I think we're all hungry for that right now. Having that piece of chocolate and really savoring it and chewing it slowly. There's that savor word. What I love about this panel and what the conversation has brought up is about how important taste is. You know, we eat a lot of mediocre food, and people don't want that. Food is an experience, and we want it to be an experience. So savoring it, we can have one little piece of chocolate and eat it and savor it, and really enjoy it, versus a whole pile of chocolate and mindlessly popping in our mouths. Because often we're thinking about the next bite before we finish the one that we have. So eating that piece of chocolate, savoring it for a snack can be really important in the afternoon. Also, simplifying your environment with a snack. There's an interesting research study that showed people who put snacks either on their desk or in a drawer where they couldn't see it, or across the room in a cupboard. And what they found is those snacks that they love, if they put them in a place where they knew they were there, but they couldn't see them, they really went to go get them when they wanted them. They just weren't eating them mindlessly because that they were there. So placing your snacks in a convenient place, but a thoughtful, mindful place is really important. You can create a mindful eating in your office, in your kitchen. And then finally, of course, that's smiling. The snacking and smiling. Snacking makes us happy, so we're naturally going to smile as we snack mindfully, though, of course. And just using that, I would encourage people who are listening, the next time you snack, take a moment to pause and smile between each bite. And if you want more snacks, that's fine. Just do it in a mindful way and make that decision mindfully.
So do I also have to snack using my left hand?
Yes. Try it. I think you'll be so surprised of using, and this particular tip goes back to a study where they had people snack with their non-dominant hand, and they found that they actually ate 30% less. So that really simple action can make a big difference, and that's a lot of the research and the work that I focus on, is not about changing what you eat, but the behaviors that we have around the snacks and the meals that we have. So Try that. Try that today.
I'm going to, and I'll let you know how it goes. All right, Hank. So is there any research to show that companies, are putting more monetary support behind advertising better-for-you products? Not just producing them, but advertising them. And does that affect how they end up doing in the marketplace?
Yeah, actually, a great question. We do know overall that there is more spending behind what we call lower calorie and better for you types of products. These products have really grown over the last decade and a half, and companies are putting more of their marketing dollars into those. I still think there's an opportunity to even spend more because they're the growth vehicle, and I think many companies are still perhaps overspending on the more traditional types of products and can be skewing some of those dollars more towards these lower calorie, portion control type of packaging. Again, they're the growth vehicle. So yes, we see a trend. As for the rationale, what it's doing or not, I mean, the food industry, if you count packaged goods, restaurants, supermarkets, etc., spend in excess of $15 billion annually on that. So the key change that's needed is to be skewing more and more of these dollars towards these better-for-you versions. Again, they're good for the consumer, but also they would more handsomely reward the companies. We also see a growth in what the companies are spending, packaged goods companies are spending in the supermarkets, that they're putting more and more of their promotional dollars. When we say promotional dollars, we mean for displays or reducing the price or putting their items in feature magazines. They're putting more dollars there, and again, that's helping these particular categories to grow too. So again, it's moving in this direction. Still a little bit more work to be done, but going in the right way.
And I'll add that I can talk a bit about that as well, because we've been doing that here at Mondelez, where we've allocated more of our advertising dollars to products like Belvita and Triscuit that are high fiber products that are better for you products, because we do see those categories growing more quickly, because that's what consumers are looking for. So again, to support what Hank is saying, we do allocate the dollars to those categories that are growing more quickly. They're growing more quickly because they better meet what consumers are looking for in the snacking aisle. And it's very much a virtuous circle where we put more money behind those products. They continue to grow more quickly, providing consumers more and more better snacking opportunities.
Excellent. Seems like that's where having a really good understanding of that better for you group that we talked about, those three groups, would really affect the kind of advertising decisions you'd make too, what the actual content of the ads is.
Well, absolutely. And in fact, that's one of the things that we preach to corporations, because these folks are the ones that are demanding, they're the perfect consumer for these kinds of products. Again, they're on the run, they're stressed, they need convenience, they have kids, and they want everybody to eat a little bit better and take in fewer calories. And they're over a third of the population. So they're basically screaming for better for you versions. They don't want to give up their favorite foods. They just need them in better packages or more compact packaging or better for you versions. And again, those companies that capitalize on that will seriously grow. Our evidence supports that. So again, this is good news. It's good for the consumer and it's good for the corporations at the same time.
Excellent. Let's talk about the people who aren't particularly interested in health-conscious eating and just want their tasty foods. How can you go about encouraging mindful snacking among those folks?
Well, what we've seen in our research is I like the notion of stealth health, because especially when you talk about more indulgent types of products, there is a little bit of a disconnect sometimes for the consumer when you say this is, quote, a healthy product and they want it to be indulgent. They sometimes go where they think it might not taste as good. So there are several companies where they're basically taking out saturated fats or salt or sodium, I should say, some sugars, taking out some of the calories, but not necessarily trumpeting that they're doing that, because there is some concern that if they start screaming a little too loudly on that, consumers might have a potential backlash. So again, with the exception of our extreme end group, which again will pull off a few strips of tree bark into their snacks. Most consumers want the taste, and when you talk about healthier versions, again, they don't want to see a disconnect between what they enjoy eating and being told that something radically has been done to you. And of course, we always say chocolate gets an exemption. All right, don't mess with the chocolate. Because people like chocolate. Just give it to me in fewer calories or in smaller packs.
I was going to say, and I can bank on that for just a moment, is that we have to dispel this notion, that sort of this pervasive notion that healthy food doesn't taste good. And I think there is a lot of healthy food that does taste good. So we need to spread that message out there.
And we also think dialogues like this help, just to get people to think more about mindful snacking.
Right.
Mindful snacking is really about eating with intention, as we've said, and being more conscious about what you eat, how you eat it, and when you're eating it. And to make sure that we have, as a consumer products company, snacks that serve these different needs that people have. So snacks that help people curb their hunger, snacks that give them the nutritional boost that they need, or simply just provide them that delicious moment of joy they're looking for whenever they're looking for it during the day. But to do it in a mindful fashion. And so I think talking about it more helps everybody, and I think having people just be more mindful about it is the way we want people to go in the future.
Excellent. I agree. So I think I'm going to invent chocolate-covered tree bark, and I'll make I'll make a fortune. So, gosh, it's time to wrap up already. It's gone by so quickly. It's been so fascinating. Thank you, everybody, for sharing your insights and your experiences with us all. Also, thanks to the attendees who've participated today for joining us and contributing to the dialogue. We hope you've gained some good information about mindful snacking in practice, and you'll take what you learned out into your communities and share that with them. So, Mondelez is going to be sharing highlights and sound bites from today's Hangout on their social media channels. So we encourage you to retweet and share those posts among your own followers in the next few weeks, if you would. And please do stay tuned for updates on the third panel in this series. We look forward to connecting with you again when that time comes. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.